What if I told you there were 10 medieval superfoods that disappeared not because they were bad, but because we built a food system that forgot how to value patience, resilience, and flavors that don't fit a barcode? These were plants that got families through lean winters, kept monasteries functioning, and added vitamins when markets were bare. Also, some of them sound strange, but surprisingly taste good. As we count down from 10 to 1, notice how each one answers a problem the Middle Ages solved without refrigerators, global shipping, or plastic. Ready to argue with your fridge? Number 10. Skirret. Skirret was the quiet accountant of the medieval garden, steady, sweet, and always there when you needed it. Plant a clump once, and underground it multiplies into a fistful of thin ivory roots. Farmers liked that it didn't demand constant weeding or perfect soil. In a world where a late frost could ruin the week, Skirret sat calmly in the ground and waited. That's not just convenience, that's food security. Its flavor lands between parsnip and carrot, with a soft honeyed edge that caramelizes when roasted. Cooks boiled it for broths thick enough to stand a spoon in, mashed it with herbs for a fast side, or sliced and pan-fried it until the edges turned crisp and nutty. Eat it, and you understand why medieval kitchen notes mention it without fanfare the way you note bread or salt. It was part of the baseline. What killed it? Not taste, process. Those clustered, finger-like roots didn't please later markets that wanted thick, identical cylinders that stack neatly in crates and behave under machines. Skirret was too honest to pretend. It forks when it wants. It grows where it can. It asks a knife, not a harvester. Yet, if you judge by the fork, not the forklift, it wins. Imagine digging a plant in January and finding sweetness you didn't have to store or can. Quick question for you. If a food waits underground until you're ready, is that laziness or genius? Keep that in mind, because the next entry pulls off an even stranger trick. A root that tastes faintly like oysters while never leaving the field, and it made fasting days feel like a small feast. Number 9. Salsify. Salsify is the garden's inside joke, ugly on the outside, ocean-kissed on the inside. Peel away the rough skin, simmer or sauté, and suddenly you're tasting a gentle, briny sweetness that medieval cooks leaned on during religious fasts. Monasteries knew what they were doing. If meat was out and fish was restricted, a root that whispers see without breaking rules was priceless. White salsify and its darker-skinned cousin, often called black salsify, both served the table, with the dark type peeling cleanly into cream-colored batons that hold shape in a pan. It thrives in cold months, can be left in the soil like a living pantry, and stores well if dug and kept cool. In a stew with onions and herbs, it melts. On a plate with butter and a squeeze of acidity, it stands confidently on its own. So why did it vanish from grocery culture? Because it grows slowly and refuses to be conventionally attractive. It is long and thin, sometimes bent, and indifferent to your expectation of perfect cylinders. That matters to buyers who shop with their eyes. But taste never cared about photogenic. Ask yourself, would you rather eat the prettiest food in the room or the one you remember tomorrow? Hold that thought while we pivot from a root that pretends to be seafood to a fruit that only becomes edible after it fails. Medieval people built desserts around patience. Modern shoppers reach for instant shine. Which side are you on? Number 8. Medlar. Pick a medlar too early and it might crack a tooth. Medieval gardeners knew the rule. Harvest late, then leave it to blet, a tidy word for a slow, controlled softening that looks like decay but unlocks flavor. Weeks later, the flesh turns to brown custard, with the texture of applesauce and the mood of spiced wine. Spread it on warm bread, spoon it beside cheese, bake it into a tart that somehow tastes like winter solved. It arrives when other fruit is gone, a last bright note before the deep cold, and then lasts a while once properly softened. In a world where seasons weren't style but fate, that timing felt generous. Why doesn't it rule our markets now? Because it's inconvenient to sell patience. Meddlers ask you to trust the process and wait while they look worse before they get perfect. We've trained ourselves to think good food should be camera ready at checkout. Medieval eaters trained themselves to expect a reward at the end of a ritual. Out of those two habits, which one produces more memorable flavor? Be honest, would you save a corner on your shelf for a fruit that brags only after it surrenders? Keep your answer for later, because our next plant didn't care for shelves at all. It came with the Romans, refused to stay in tidy rows, and fed coastlines, whether anyone invited it or not. Number 7. Alexander's. Alexander's is the edible overachiever. Shoots like celery, leaves for soups, flowers for salads, roots for the pot, and seeds to grind as a peppery spice. Romans carried it into Britain, and it never really left the sea winds. It grows tall and confident, pushing umbels of yellow-green blooms that bees love, hugging cliff paths and old walls with the persistence of an old friend who keeps showing up with food. If you lived near fishing harbors, you knew it. It cut through rich stews of fish and grain, and it arrived early when fields were still thinking about spring. In winter, it was medicine for taste. Too many meals of salted stock make a tongue beg for edge. Alexander's brought it. So what pushed it aside? Celery's rise to stardom. The new darling was milder, crunchier, and easy to standardize. Markets prefer predictability over charisma, and Alexander's retreated to hedgerows. Still, it stands there today, green in storms, waiting for someone to notice. Here's a question for the comments. Do you want vegetables to behave or to surprise you? Hold that debate as we turn to a plant that didn't shout or wander. It committed to one job, showing up every spring, and did it so well it fed people through the hunger gap without ceremony. Number 6. Good King Henry. Good King Henry isn't flashy. It is the neighbor who shovels your steps before you wake. Sow it once and you get years of returns. Early shoots when storage runs low, broad leaves when you crave something green, tight buds that cook like tiny broccoli when you need variety. Medieval households loved that it needed so little and gave so much. In late winter and early spring, when grain bins felt light and salted, food tested patience, these leaves and shoots plugged holes in diets and moods. Folklore pressed it into simple remedies for minor ailments, which is another way of saying it was close at hand and trusted. What happened? Annual crops with uniform timing and looks took the stage, matching the rhythm of commerce rather than the rhythm of household need. But imagine you're planting a resilient garden now. Would you rather gamble on a finicky import or rely on a perennial that forgives your mistakes and still feeds you? If you like the second option, keep listening, because the next two plants didn't even require sowing. They simply arrived, generous and uninvited, and for centuries people were smart enough to say thanks instead of weed. Number 5. Chickweed. Chickweed is the polite volunteer that never waits for an invitation. It threads between stones, fills bare patches, and covers winter beds with tiny white stars. You could count on it when other greens failed, mild, tender, and easy to eat raw or wilted. Medieval cooks tossed it into pottages, scattered it into salads, and thanked it for arriving when gardens slept. In grand houses, it wasn't beneath the cook. In poor cottages, it felt like relief. Healers cooled skin with it and brewed teas when fevers ran hot. It doesn't need you to coddle it, it just asks you to notice. Modern agriculture labeled it a nuisance because it disrespects straight lines and planting schedules. Spray cans did the rest. But take off your weed glasses and ask a simpler question. Does it help? If the answer is yes, and for many communities in cold months, it was then, it belongs on a plate more than it belongs in a manual of herbicides. Imagine a salad the color of February turning suddenly green because a plant decided you were worth the trouble. Keep that image nearby, because the next plant is the louder sibling, bigger, bolder, and even more versatile when years turned poor. Number 4. Fat Hen Chenopodium. Fat Hen is the free pantry that shows up after you plow. Its leaves cook down into something hearty and rich, a cousin to spinach with less fuss, and its seeds dry into a grainy addition that can pad out breads and porridges. Archaeologists keep finding its seeds in medieval trash pits, which is our unglamorous proof that people ate it routinely. Chickens adored it, hence the name, and by feeding them, you were really feeding yourself later in eggs and meat. When harvest stumbled or weather laughed at planning, Fat Hen helped households hold the line between "we're fine" and "we're worried." Why did it lose out? Because we pursued fields that looked like spreadsheets. Anything unplanned became enemy, and we forgot that some unplanned guests bring dinner. Think about what it means to declare war on food that grows for free. Did we gain control or just more bills at checkout? Drop your answer after we finish, because we're about to move from edible weeds to herbs with superpowers. One leaf that can season a pot from the Middle Ages to now, and then a leaf that goes even louder but comes with a modern caution. Number 3. Lovage. Lovage is what you reach for when subtle isn't enough. Break a leaf, and the scent leaps up. Celery turned decisive, with a warm, almost sweet undertone that makes legumes, roots, and meats remember they can be interesting. Medieval kitchens loved it because a little went a long way. In lean seasons that mattered, monasteries kept it for digestive grumbles and water retention, and cooks built it into stocks, breads, and stews. Seeds perfumed loaves. Roots, when used, behaved like gentle parsnips. Leaves rescued pots that needed a point of view. Another miracle. It lives for decades, returning strong each spring without complaints, shrugging at frost and neglect. It faded partly because trade routes poured glitter into pantries, pepper, cinnamon, and new flavors drew attention away from the old friend. But in a world that again cares about thrift and punch, lovage feels like a cheat code. Grow once, season forever.